Ever wonder how an empire really holds on to power? I mean, it's not just about armies and laws, right? The most powerful kind of control is way more subtle. It's about conquering that one territory that is the absolute hardest to win back, the human mind. So, how do they do it? How does that actually work? We're going to dive into this huge question by looking at the fictional town of Malgudi from R.K. Narayan's amazing novel Swami and Friends. It gives us this incredible window into the psychology of what colonialism really feels like on the ground. All right, here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start by setting the scene in Malgudi, then look at the tools used for indoctrination, in the classroom. We'll see how that leads to copying the colonizer, what happens when a confused rebellion kicks off, and finally, we'll talk about the psychological shadow that lasts for generations.
Okay, so let's start with our setting. We're in 1930s British-occupied India. Malgudi seems like this totally normal, quiet town. But when we see it through the eyes of a young boy named Swami, we start to see these subtle but really powerful ways colonialism was shaping how an entire generation thought, how they felt, and even how they saw themselves.
So, how did this whole mind-shaping thing actually happen? Well, let's look at what was maybe the empire's most effective weapon for conquering minds: the school. Yeah, in Malgudi, schools weren't just about learning your ABCs and multiplication tables. Nope, they were more like factories, designed to produce a very specific type of person. Someone who would grow up admiring Western culture and, whether they knew it or not, start to see their own culture as less important. And listen, this wasn't always subtle. Just take a look at this quote from Swami's scripture teacher, Mr. Ebenezer. He's not holding back at all, right? It's a direct, aggressive attack on the Hindu faith of his own students. I mean, this is colonialism in action, actively trying to tear down a local culture to replace it with what they called a superior Western one. And this just brilliantly shows the complete disconnect in their education. Think about it. The students are learning all about English history, but not their own. They can probably tell you about the River Thames in London, but they know next to nothing about the River Sarayu that's literally flowing right past their town. This curriculum wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. It was designed to train them to see the world and their own place in it through a British lens. So what happens when you're taught from a very young age that another culture is just better? Well, a really powerful desire starts to grow. It's not just about obeying the colonizer anymore. It's about wanting to be the colonizer.
And you see this desire perfectly in the character of Rajam. Why is he the cool kid? Why does Swami and the other boys look up to him so much? Well, if you look at the list, it's not because he's a great guy, at least not at first. It's because he's a walking, talking collection of Western status symbols. He speaks perfect English, he dresses like an English boy, and his dad has a powerful job in the British system. And this gets us to a really key idea here, the colonial mentality. This is that internalized belief that the colonizer's culture, their language, their clothes, their way of life, is just inherently superior. The colonized person starts judging their own self-worth against a foreign ruler. And that mentality leads straight to this act of mimicry. It's basically a performance. You start copying the colonizer to feel valued, to feel accepted. And there is no better example of this in the entire book than the boys' favorite thing to do: play cricket. See, they don't just want to play cricket, which is already the Englishman's game. They want to be an English cricket club. They name their team the MCC, a direct copy of the super famous and prestigious Marylebone Cricket Club in London, the heart of the entire cricket world. But this performance, it gets even deeper. Just look at these steps. First, they literally drop their own names and adopt the names of English cricket heroes. Then they get obsessed with getting official English gear because they think it's the only way to be a real team. And finally, they write this desperate letter to a sports shop in England, basically begging for approval from the very source of the culture they're trying to copy. Their whole identity as cricketers is wrapped up in how good of a copy they can be. But remember, this is 1930s India. The winds of independence are starting to blow. So what happens when these boys, with their colonized minds, try to jump into the nationalist movement? Well, the result is a messy mix of passion, total confusion, and some really tragic irony. So Swami finds himself in the middle of a protest against British goods, and he gets totally swept up in the patriotic energy. A protester sees his cap and yells at him to burn it because it's foreign. Swami, wanting to prove he's a true Indian patriot, proudly chucks it right into the bonfire. But then comes the heartbreaking twist. He gets home, all proud of himself, and his father tells him the truth. That cap he just burned as a symbol of foreign evil, it was actually Indian-made. It came from a local shop that the independence movement was trying to support.
This moment is just so perfect because it captures the deep confusion of the time. Swami had all the passion of a patriot, but he didn't have the real understanding of what that meant. He was just performing nationalism, the same way he was performing being an English cricketer, without really getting the substance of it.
Okay, let's zoom out and look at the big picture here. The real tragedy of colonialism, as this story shows so well, isn't just about politics or money. It's about creating this lasting internal confusion, a psychological shadow that sticks around long after the empire is gone. The characters in Malgudi are left in what scholars call a hybrid space. They're basically stuck in the middle. They've been taught to look down on their own traditions, but let's be real, they will never, ever be truly accepted as English. So they don't really belong anywhere. And here's the ultimate tragedy. The damage is so deep that even their dreams, their ambitions, have been colonized. Swami's idea of success is to be a great cricketer, measured by an English standard. The very goalposts for their own lives have been set by a foreign power. The story ends with Rajam, who is the symbol of that British-aligned world, moving away, leaving Swami behind. And that's such a powerful metaphor, isn't it? The empire eventually packs up and goes home, but it leaves its former subjects behind to deal with the broken dreams and the fractured identities it created. Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question to chew on. The political structures of colonialism might be gone for many parts of the world, but the story really forces us to ask, how long do these psychological shadows actually last? And what does it even take to truly decolonize a mind?